On a November night, the air outside the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan was freezing, but inside the grand ballroom was a completely different world, a realm of opulence and splendor at its peak. The brilliant baccarat crystal chandeliers cast dazzling reflections across expensive tuxedos and radiant faces of over 200 elite guests from the technology and finance world. It was the most anticipated wedding of the season, the union of Julian Reed, heir to a renowned tech dynasty, and Seraphina Sarah Thorne, a biogenetic scientist praised as a prodigy. But that perfection was suddenly torn apart. The graceful symphony came to an abrupt halt, replaced by a single sharp, chilling sound, a slap. Evelyn Reed, 58, felt the sting burn across her left cheek, a searing pain spreading to her temple. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the shock and the bottomless ache inside her chest. She staggered backward, her gray-blue eyes wide open, reflecting the cold light of the chandelier. The platinum Tiffany & Cody brooch, a keepsake from her late husband, flew off and landed on the Italian black-and-white marble floor with a lonely metallic clink that echoed through the stunned silence. The one who had struck her, Seraphina Thorne, 35, stood across from her like an ice goddess. Her ivory Oscar de la Renta wedding gown, with its sweeping train, seemed to emit its own light, a cruel contrast to the twisted fury and arrogance on her face. "That's a lesson for your short-sightedness." Evelyn Sarah screamed, her voice unnecessarily loud, yet sharp enough to pierce the suffocating stillness. She was panting, her hands still raised as if savoring victory. "Did you really think you could keep us out of the 3-story penthouse on the 60th floor of the Crown, a $45 million property overlooking Central Park South? What are you keeping it for? To collect dust and loneliness, staring at old photos of a dead man? Hand over the keys now. This is our rightful claim." Evelyn, known for her modest appearance, often mistaken for a retired English teacher living off a modest pension, could only tremble. She was the groom's mother, the woman who had secretly poured every ounce of her energy and resources into protecting her son. Now she was just a pawn being thrown aside. The worst pain wasn't from the slap, it was from her son's eyes. Julian Reed, 33, stood beside his bride. Handsome and composed in his Tom Ford tuxedo, he showed no emotion. Julian looked at his mother with a detached, icy gaze, as though she were a stranger causing trouble at his celebration. "Mother," Julian said evenly, his tone chillingly flat, like an actor reading a rehearsed script, "you're ruining my wedding." "Sarah's right. You should move to the smaller estate in Connecticut I arranged. Sarah and I need that space, that privacy, and especially the infrastructure there to complete the project." The project, Evelyn's heart clenched at the name. That word had haunted her for 6 months, ever since Julian had grown distant, erratic, and disturbingly devoted to Sarah. The dreadful silence was now breaking into rising murmurs. Guests craned their necks, whispering, hungry to witness the scandal unfold. Everyone knew Evelyn was the widow of the late brilliant scientist William Reed, yet she lived so modestly, almost suspiciously modestly for a woman of her means. "You don't need that kind of luxury anymore," Evelyn Sarah continued coldly, her tone now calculated and cruel. "You should thank us for simplifying your life. You have 10 minutes to pack whatever personal trinkets you cling to and leave. Take nothing else. Not even that old gold ring. Everything now belongs to us to support the great project." Evelyn sank to her knees, groping for the fallen Tiffany brooch. Hot tears streamed down her cheeks, but they were no longer tears of humiliation. They were tears of bitter realization. She had lived quietly, even disguised herself as an outdated middle-class widow to shield Julian from enemies, and from his own arrogance. Now that disguise had become a weapon used against her. Slowly she rose to her feet. The trembling was gone, replaced by a cold, furious calm. That slap was no longer a personal insult. It was a declaration of war. The time had come to shed the fragile mask she'd worn for a decade. "All right, Sarah, you want the keys, do you?" Evelyn's voice was low and deliberate, but carried a deadly steadiness. "You want the penthouse, my life, my data." She reached into her worn Hermes purse, the one people assumed was fake, and pulled out a micro-sized satellite phone used only for top-security communications. Her fingers moved with mechanical precision as she dialed a complex code and emergency activation sequence known only within intelligence networks. Cipher 7. This is Echo 1. Emergency protocol, Black Diamond activated. Initiate full-scale lockdown and trace. A low, emotionless male voice answered in perfect clipped English. Black Diamond confirmed. Global financial and data lockdown in progress. Estimated completion 25 minutes. Please confirm safety of Alpha Target. Alpha Target is secure but compromised physically. Initiate chain reaction phase. Evelyn replied firmly. Sarah and Julian exchanged confused, alarmed glances. They didn't understand the military-grade jargon. "What the hell are you doing?" Evelyn Sarah sneered, trying to regain control of her tone. "Calling the police? You have no legal grounds to contest that property. You're just a delusional old woman." "The police." Evelyn laughed bitterly. A laugh laced with pain and venom. "Oh, Sarah, do you really think I'm some naive widow living on Social Security? For the past 20 years, I haven't been a retired English teacher. I've been the covert founder and director of Vance Global Security, the largest private cyber intelligence and counterterrorism contractor in the United States, serving both government and Fortune 500 clients." The words struck like a lightning bolt. Julian staggered backward, his face draining of color. All his life he had believed his mother was meek, fragile, harmless. "My husband, William Reed, didn't die in some random car crash, as I told you 10 years ago." Evelyn continued, her voice now fierce and commanding a complete transformation from the humiliated woman moments ago. "He was a pioneering scientist researching neurogenetic modification technology, and he was murdered by an organization that wanted his work to control human cognition and behavior." She pointed straight at Sarah, her hand trembling with fury. "And you, Seraphina Thorne, you're not the acclaimed biotech researcher your forged records claim you are. You're a senior operative of the scientific terrorist organization Epsilon Dawn, the same group Vance Global Security has hunted for a decade. The same group responsible for William's death." Sarah's arrogance vanished. Her face went pale, her eyes wide with fear and fury. She had been unmasked in front of hundreds of witnesses. "You drugged my son with a cognitive alteration agent," Evelyn continued, her voice breaking yet resolute. "You reprogrammed Julian's neural chemistry, making him believe he loves you, and needs my penthouse, where William's original data is stored, to complete your so-called project mass-producing that chemical to control the world's tech leaders." A loud boom echoed from the service entrance of the ballroom. At the same moment, all the plasma screens, once displaying romantic wedding photos, flickered and turned black, replaced by the sleek blue and black interface of Vance Global Security and a flashing message system override. The calm, authoritative voice of Marcus Cipher 7, VGS's elusive director, reverberated through the plaza's sound system, silencing the chaos emergency alert. "All personal and corporate financial assets linked to Mr. Julian Reed and Mrs. Seraphina Thorne have been permanently frozen under the order of the U.S. Federal Court per the Anti-Terrorism and National Security Acts. The payments for this event under a false guarantor are hereby canceled. The plaza's management is advised no insurance, no service, no payment. All guests present are witnesses to an active federal case and are required to cooperate with incoming authorities. The plaza managers, already pale from the initial scandal, now scrambled in panic, phones ringing off the hook. Evelyn turned toward Julian. Tears filled her eyes, not from weakness but from heartbreak. She had hoped Julian would break free from the chemical's influence on his own. She had wanted to preserve a shred of his dignity, but he had chosen to stand there watching his mother be humiliated and struck. "I gave you the chance, Julian," she said quietly, voice trembling but strong. "I wanted you to find your way out of that chemical prison yourself, but you chose to watch. That's my fault I protected you for so long you no longer know what's real. I built this fragile mask and you used it against me. Now you'll face the reality I created." Evelyn turned and walked away. Behind her, Sarah's furious, panicked scream echoed through the ballroom. "You can't do this. Our plan. You can't take it all away. We'll expose you for abusing your power." Evelyn didn't look back. She whispered to herself, clutching the reclaimed platinum brooch in her hand. "I lost you long ago, Julian. Now it's time to save myself and the world from you." Outside the plaza, a black bulletproof GMC Yukon Denali waited. The door swung open and Evelyn stepped inside. "Black Diamond Protocol has been fully activated, Mrs. Vance said Marcus Chen, his tone respectful. "Our agents are sealing off the penthouse at the Crown, but we only have 20 minutes before Epsilon Dawn reacts. They may already be tracking Sarah." "They won't react in time," Evelyn replied, her voice eerily calm. "I embedded a delay algorithm into Sarah's security protocols. They'll think it's a routine network glitch for the first 20 minutes, but we must move fast. Julian is a victim. Sarah is the mastermind. Our priority is to stop the chemical production and recover William's original data." "Mrs. Vance, after what just happened, do you want to confront Julian and Sarah directly?" Marcus asked. Evelyn gazed out the window. The city lights of New York shimmered like cold, distant tears. "Marcus, I already have," she said quietly. "That slap was my final act of mercy. I'm no longer the blind mother. I'm Echo One. Drive to the Crown. It's time to end William's project for good." The armored GMC Yukon Denali cruised down 7th Avenue in Manhattan, cutting through the cold night. The city's neon lights could not dispel the tense, heavy atmosphere inside the vehicle. Marcus Chen, Evelyn's most trusted advisor, worked to keep stable contact with the VGS team, but he knew all of Evelyn's focus was fixed on one thing: 10 years of self-questioning. 10 years, Marcus Evelyn Reed began, her voice low and deliberate, carrying a deep fatigue she had long hidden beneath a facade of resolve. She needed to speak it aloud to confront the brutal truth about her own role in this tragedy. "For 10 years, I lived under the guise of a retired English teacher, a frail widow who clung to her grief in old textbooks. I painstakingly fashioned the perfect camouflage, an invisible armor called banality, to shield Julian from the darkness William warned about. That disguise was not merely a security strategy, it was an ethical experiment that I failed at painfully." Marcus nodded slightly and set his tablet down to show he was listening entirely. He understood that for Evelyn, admitting this mistake mattered more than any cyber victory. "My husband, William Reed, was not an ordinary scientist, Marcus. He was a genius, a pioneer in neurogenetic modification technology, but more importantly, he was a man obsessed with scientific ethics. His research was not for money or fame. It was to understand the biological mechanisms of trust and loyalty in the human brain. He called it the Extended Trust Project. He discovered that it was possible to use an unbelievably subtle molecular compound, not a drug, but a synthetic neurotransmitter, to activate and reprogram oxytocin and vasopressin receptors in the hypothalamus. Essentially, it could create forced loyalty and engineered affection." Evelyn closed her eyes, recalling the worried look William wore before he was murdered 10 years earlier. He created that cognitive alteration agent, the CAA, but immediately realized its catastrophic danger. It could turn a person into an utterly obedient puppet for whoever administered it. It was the ultimate psychological control tool, a perfect biological weapon. He swore to destroy all samples and data, but before he could, Epsilon Dawn found him. They are not merely terrorists. They are scientific zealots who believe the world's chaos can only be solved by absolute control by an elite. Epsilon Dawn. The worshippers of absolute control. Marcus confirmed, his voice wary. They want to use William's technology to remove free will from tech and political elites, creating a world order based on unconditional obedience. Their danger is incalculable, Mrs. Vance. Exactly. Evelyn continued, clenching her hand until her nails bit into her palm. After William's death, I knew I had to do two things to protect his legacy and my son. One, continue to run Vance Global Security covertly, an organization whose very senior members didn't know I was at the helm to hunt them. and 2, create the perfect cover for Julian. I sold off all ostentatious assets, the Hamptons yacht, the art collection, and kept the penthouse at the Crown because that's where William had placed the data vault and his safe lab. I played the role of the grieving mother living off Social Security and old rental income, so Julian would believe he had to fend for himself in tech. Evelyn sighed, pain evident in every word. And here is where I committed the greatest, most terrible mistake, Marcus. This is the error of a mother I cannot deny. I relied too much on what I called tough love. I wanted Julian to face banality, to suffer manufactured financial hardship, so he would discover humility, independence, and his true worth. I believed artificial scarcity would forge him teach perseverance. I deliberately reduced direct supervision, having VGS agents monitor him remotely and intervene only for physical threats. I wanted him to believe he had fully matured, completely independent, and carving his own career. But my deception created a deadly void, Evelyn admitted with pain. A void of truth and genuine emotional support that Serafina Thorne, a rigorously trained operative of Epsilon Dawn, easily filled. My pretense of weakness, my exaggerated modesty, did not make Julian stronger. It made him arrogant, complacent, and convinced that his mother was a manipulable burden. He came to despise what he perceived as my weakness. I failed to see the psychological transformation of my son in time because I hid behind anonymity, Evelyn said, her gray-blue eyes staring into the distance as if trying to pierce the night to find her son's true image. Evelyn's suspicion peaked when Julian met Sarah. She arrived with a flawless dossier, Marcus, a young scientist dazzlingly successful and stunningly beautiful. I had VGS investigate her covertly right away, and the initial results were suspiciously clean. But when I began to question Julian, he used the very independence and maturity I had crafted to push me away. He told me I was outdated, overbearing, ruining his new life. He learned Sarah's manipulative phrasing and used it to make me feel guilty and withdraw. Evelyn remembered the psychological signs. He began repeating Sarah's phrases, not arguing, but asserting assertions about the necessity of a larger space, about the obsolescence of old ways. He looked at me not with a son's love, but with disdain, like a patient's forced to endure. I saw that indifference, and I excused it as work pressure and my son's maturation. Doubt hardened into certainty when Julian brought up the project and demanded the penthouse. I knew that apartment wasn't about luxury, but about strategic location and the layers of electronic security only William knew. More importantly, there is a hidden safe room containing William's original data and a small reserve of the cognitive alteration agent we hadn't yet destroyed. I knew they needed it. Evelyn had secretly used VGS's network to monitor Julian and Sarah as closely as possible. By planting a sophisticated tracking program on Julian's phone, which he believed to be a premium financial app, she intercepted Sarah's encrypted conversations. 5 weeks ago, I overheard Sarah speaking with someone she called Orion, an Epsilon Dawn superior. Sarah confirmed she had administered the first dose of the agent to Julian via a sports drink. The dosage was tiny, just enough to bend loyalty and establish coercive emotional dependence. It isn't love, Marcus. It's neuro-genetic programming, Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling with unbearable pain. Julian doesn't love her. His brain has been programmed to believe she is the sole source of love, purpose, recognition, and desire. She turned my son into an utterly loyal, psychological puppet. The dilemma and the mother's final error. Evelyn knew the truth, but she hesitated. That hesitation was the apex of her mistake. I could have acted immediately, used VGS authority to seize Sarah, but I didn't. I saw the change. I knew the agent could wash out naturally in a few weeks if no additional doses were given. I stubbornly wanted Julian to realize the deception himself, so that when the agent wore off, he would instinctively recoil from his actions and run back to me. I wanted him to have a moment of awakening and redemption. I secretly shipped Julian a premium multivitamin through a delivery service he trusted. It contained a small amount of the antagonist William had developed, a low-level antagonist. I hoped it would accelerate elimination of the agent and help him regain will. I relied on a natural recovery and the inherent goodness of my son instead of decisive action, as a security chief. And that was my second grave mistake, Evelyn admitted, her eyes rimmed in red, though no tears fell. I placed affection above duty. I gave Sarah precious time to prepare the project, a biological lab to mass-produce the agent inside the apartment I thought was safest. I provided her time to consolidate control over Julian. And today was the climax, Evelyn said, tightening her fist. She didn't only want the apartment, she wanted to humiliate me to prove the old mother had been utterly defeated so Julian would see that and strengthen his faith in Sarah. The slap was not just a physical attack, it was a psychological assault aimed at Julian, a final reinforcing dose of belief. And Julian did not react. He stood still, indifferent, looking at me like an obstacle to be removed. At that moment, I knew my waiting was a fatal error. I had wagered that love would trump manipulated science. I had bet the world's safety on the emotions of a son who had been programmed. Echo 1 activated Black Diamond, not only to detain her and protect the world, but to save myself from that regret. Now we will do what VGS does, end the threat. The car stopped before the Crown's Tower, a monument to New York wealth. Evelyn inhaled deeply, casting aside the image of the grieving mother. She was Echo 1 founder of VGS, operator of the nation's largest private intelligence and security organization. Marcus, have you notified the FBI and DHS? She asked. Notifications were sent under Delta-level security protocols. Marcus replied, voice alert. They won't know the full scope, but they'll cordon the area and assume a routine bioterror incident. That will buy us time to conduct the infiltration and recovery phase. Evelyn stepped from the vehicle, her gray cashmere coat wrapping her in chill authority. She was no longer the woman who had been slapped. She was the woman who had revoked financial guarantees worth hundreds of millions with a single encrypted call. Marcus, you and Alpha Team will neutralize peripheral devices and take control of the apartment's security systems. I will go straight to the safe lab. I'm the only one who knows William's voice lock passcode. If Sarah has used the penthouse as a production site, we must destroy everything immediately before Epsilon Dawn can intervene. Evelyn looked up at the skyscraper. On the 60th floor, lights still blazed. She knew the greatest battle of her life was not against Sarah, but against that room, the room that held her husband's career and now her son's betrayal. Main priority, Evelyn told Marcus, her voice steely. I will find the complete antagonist. That compound can save Julian if Sarah hasn't already destroyed it. And if Sarah is there, Mrs. Vance, Marcus asked. Evelyn curled a cold smile. She has taught me a valuable lesson, Marcus. That when kindness is mistaken for weakness, decisive action is the highest form of self-preservation. I have no choice now but to become the person I hid for 10 years. She turned and strode into the Crown's grand lobby with no trace left of weakness or doubt. Evelyn Reed stepped into the marble-floored lobby of the Crown Tower. She was no longer a timid mother. She was Echo 1. Her face was now hard as stone cold and utterly focused. Her eyes swept across the security area without a flicker. In her ear, a micro-wireless earpiece was active, linked to the temporary command hub of Vance Global Security, VGS, stationed 2 blocks away. Alpha 1. I'm in the main lobby. Disable all facial recognition cameras and biometric locks on the elevator door for 15 seconds. I need the private lift straight to the 60th floor. Evelyn ordered, her voice low and sharp. Copy that, Echo 1. Disabling now. Done. The voice of Dana Hayes, VGS's top security engineer, came through. We've blocked Epsilon Dawn's outgoing signals. She can only use the apartment's internal network, but she doesn't know we're listening. Evelyn strode straight to the private elevator. The glass and brushed steel doors slid open silently. She inserted a forged access card crafted by VGS an encoded relic from William's time. She knew every security secret of this penthouse better than anyone alive. As the elevator ascended rapidly, Evelyn focused on one thing: the cognitive alteration agent CAA. Data based on Julian's last blood work analysis, the CAA is in the slow elimination phase. That explains why he's still functional but emotionally paralyzed. We need William's complete antidote CA. That's top priority. Understood, Echo 1. Marcus and the Alpha team are securing the 60th floor hallway. They're scanning for thermal signatures and explosives. Be ready for anything. Sarah Thorne's file marks her as more than a scientist. She's a trained assassin. The elevator doors opened onto the 60th floor. The light was soft, too soft, and the silence was unnerving. The massive penthouse, once designed in sleek minimalist luxury, now felt hollow and cold. The dark oak floors gleamed. Abstract paintings lined the walls. Evelyn's soft leather shoes made no sound as she advanced toward the personal library, the location of William's secret safe room. Suddenly, the apartment lights flickered. Echo 1. The internal network was just accessed. Sarah's in the system. She's trying to wipe the data and activate the lab's self-destruct mechanism. Dana's voice came through urgent. She's faster than I thought, Evelyn hissed. Dana cut all outbound internet and satellite channels, but leave a fake Wi-Fi signal. Let her believe she's still connected to Epsilon Dawn. Evelyn stopped before a massive ebony bookshelf. She didn't use fingerprints or a retinal scan. Instead, she slipped her hand into a hidden recess, placed her 5 fingers on precise contact points, and spoke. Loyalty is the absence of fear. It was William's voice and biometric passcode. A faint electric click sounded. The bookshelf slid back, revealing a 6-inch thick steel door to the safe room. Evelyn stepped inside and froze. There was no sign of a functioning biolab, no centrifuges, no gene sequencers, no production equipment. The room was spotless, sterile, empty. Only a desk, a large computer monitor, and a small safe remained. Dana, the safe room's empty. No lab equipment at all. Sarah wasn't manufacturing here, Evelyn said, her tone laced with frustration. We've been misled. Impossible. Echo 1. Marcus's thermal scan shows a massive concentration of biochemical materials somewhere in the apartment. The readings are off the charts, Dana shot back. Evelyn scanned the room again. Her eyes landed on the safe. She entered the code 2014 WR Julian. The safe clicked open. Inside was a small glass vial of turquoise liquid, William's complete antidote CA, and an old USB drive. The antidote's intact, and William's data. Sarah didn't get to them. Evelyn breathed, relief breaking through. She slipped the vial and USB into the inside pocket of her coat. Echo 1, watch out. Chemical concentrations spiking. It's not a lab, it's a dispersal mechanism, Marcus shouted through her earpiece. At that instant, a voice rang out from outside, mocking no longer the arrogant brides, but the sharp, lethal tone of a trained operative. Too late. Evelyn, I knew you'd come. You're predictable. You think you're the only one who understood William. The lab isn't in the apartment. The apartment, is the lab. Sarah stepped into view. No wedding gown now, but a black tactical suit fully armed. Beside her stood Julian, expressionless eyes glazed. Julian, Evelyn gasped, her heart breaking. He didn't respond. He stared at her coldly, holding a high-tech stun gun. You're compromising our project, Mother, Julian said in a flat robotic tone. You're a biological threat that must be neutralized. I injected Julian with a synthesized dose of CAA. Right after you left, the Plaza Sarah said, smiling triumphantly. That guarantees absolute loyalty for 24 hours. And as you can see, this apartment has been transformed. The HVAC system is now a CAA molecular disperser. I programmed a slow, invisible release into the air. Anyone who stays here long enough will experience neuro-genetic alteration. My goal was never William's data. My goal was the apartment itself, a living lab for production and field testing. Evelyn felt her blood run cold. This wasn't deception, it was genius-level audacity. Sarah had weaponized trust itself. "You're poisoning yourself," Evelyn said, stalling for time. Sarah scoffed. "No, Evelyn, I'm immune. You know William tested genetic modification on himself to build the perfect antidote. I followed his path but perfected it. I re-engineered my neurogenetic code 2 years ago. I'm completely immune to CAA. In fact, I can feel and control those under its influence." The ultimate revelation. Sarah wasn't just an agent. She was a living product of forbidden science. Evelyn knew she couldn't overpower Sarah physically, not with Julian as both pawn and shield. She had to use her mind. "She's boasting Dana." "Analyze her vocal frequency," Evelyn ordered quietly. "Running analysis. Confirmed Sarah's using a low-frequency subsonic pattern. It's a voice command trigger. Julian isn't speaking voluntarily. He's being controlled through auditory coding," Dana reported urgently. Evelyn glanced at the open safe. "Marcus, I have the antidote. I'll create a distraction. You and Alpha Team need to breach through the balcony and inject Julian with CA immediately. She's using him as a test subject, negative Echo 1. The balcony's locked down with military-grade laser grids. We have to disable it from the building's main security hub," Marcus replied, frustrated. Evelyn looked at Julian. His cold eyes fixed his finger, hovering near the trigger. She had to do something insane. Instead of pulling out the antidote, she took out the Tiffany platinum brooch. With a fierce motion, she hurled it straight at the massive computer monitor. The screen exploded in a shower of sparks. "What the hell are you doing?" Sarah screamed, stunned by the outburst. Evelyn seized the moment. She rushed to the desk, grabbed William's USB, and jammed it into a hidden port beneath the tabletop. Dana, 60 seconds. Download everything. It's the full blueprint for both CAA and CA. It could help us synthesize a universal antidote for the world. Julian, shoot her. "Now," Sarah screamed, issuing the activation command. Julian raised the stun gun. Evelyn didn't move. She looked directly into her son's eyes, tears streaming down her face, her voice firm yet breaking with agony. "Julian, I'm your mother. You're a victim of CAA, but you chose to let it rule you. Fight it. Remember what your father taught you. Loyalty is not the absence of fear, Julian. It's the absence of lies." Her words weren't an audio code. They were emotional code, a buried memory, a family truth. Julian's finger hesitated on the trigger. "Don't listen to her." Sarah shrieked. "She's the threat." Evelyn pulled out the complete antidote CA vial from her coat. She snapped off the top, and in a final desperate act, she didn't inject Julian. She hurled the vial into the room's ventilation system. The turquoise liquid was instantly sucked into the airflow, diffusing through the penthouse. "Damn you!" "What have you done?" Sarah screamed in panic. "That's the antidote. It'll neutralize CAA in the air. You've destroyed my lab." Evelyn gasped for breath. She had wagered everything. The antidote would take time to spread, but it had slowed Sarah's neural control over Julian. "Dana download complete," she shouted. 5 seconds, Echo 1. Almost there. At that moment, the building's alarm blared, this time a real one, not triggered by VGS. Echo 1 Epsilon Dawn just bypassed our delay algorithm. "They're coming. They've activated the apartment's self-destruct sequence. They won't let this lab fall into our hands," Marcus yelled. Sarah's face twisted into a manic grin. "Too late. Evelyn, even with the data, you'll die here. You can't save your son and stop me." Evelyn looked at Julian, now clutching his head, the stun gun clattering to the floor. He was fighting the antidote's flood of emotions. "Julian, run. Get out of this apartment," she screamed. Sarah lunged at Evelyn, her enhanced strength slamming the older woman against the wall. Evelyn's head struck the marble, blood trickled down. This wasn't a mother versus a daughter-in-law. It was a security commander versus a bioengineered weapon. "I am evolution, Evelyn." "You're obsolete," Sarah hissed, raising a high-tech blade. Evelyn closed her eyes. She had done all she could. She had recovered the data. She had freed her son. She accepted her fate. But just as the blade came down, a violent sound echoed. Julian, trembling and half-conscious, used his last ounce of strength to shove Sarah away from his mother. "Mom, run!" He gasped, his voice distorted by pain. "I'm sorry. You're the truth." That fragile confession, weak but real, was the moment Evelyn had waited and suffered 6 months for. "Thank you, Julian," she whispered, tears streaming. She knew this was their final chance. Evelyn and Julian ran toward the elevator. Sarah, genetically enhanced but stunned by Julian's defiance, scrambled after them. Marcus Initiate, Phoenix Protocol. Destroy everything on the 60th floor now. Evelyn shouted, "Copy that, Echo 1. Activating. Good luck." The steel elevator doors closed just as Sarah's hand reached them. Through the narrowing gap, her face contorted in fury and defeat. Moments later, an enormous explosion ripped through the 60th floor of the Crown, shaking the entire tower. The Epsilon Dawn self-destruct mechanism triggered. Evelyn clutched the weakened Julian in the elevator, knowing they had survived for now. But the war was far from over. Julian was the victim, yet even victims must answer for the choices they made. The explosion from the 60th floor of the Crown Tower had faded, but its echo still reverberated inside Evelyn Reed's mind. It was undeniable proof of the brutality and recklessness of the Epsilon Dawn organization and its operative, Seraphina Thorne. Evelyn and Julian had escaped by a hair's breadth, but now they faced a deeper crisis, one not of survival, but of biology and the human soul. Evelyn, her head wound hastily bandaged, sat in the temporary command center of Vance Global Security VGS, separated from Julian's medical isolation chamber by a reinforced glass wall. The blue glow of computer screens reflected off her weary, tense face. She had unlocked the USB containing William's original data, working through it alongside Marcus Chen via a fully encrypted link. She needed to understand the full extent of what Sarah had done to her son. "Marcus, you heard what Julian said in the elevator." Evelyn began, her voice low, carrying the cold control of someone bracing herself against truth. "He said, 'Mother, you're the truth.'" That was a moment of awareness, a rare flash of clarity right when the antidote CA began to take effect. It proves Julian is a victim, but it also confirms Sarah's control wasn't purely chemical. I need to know if her manipulation is permanent. Dig deeper into William's data. Marcus, speaking from a secure VGS bunker, nodded grimly. "Mrs. Vance, I've been running deep analysis on William's encrypted files, and I found something horrifying. Sarah didn't just inject the CAA, the cognitive alteration agent. She performed something far more advanced, targeted neurogenetic manipulation on Julian. The revelation hit Evelyn like an electric current. She tightened her grip on her coffee mug, steadying her breath. What genetic manipulation William warned me about, that I thought it was only theoretical. It's not theoretical anymore, Mrs. Vance. William's data shows that the original CAA was merely a catalyst and entry point. Sarah used it in combination with a modified, non-pathogenic viral vector to reprogram specific genes governing oxytocin and vasopressin receptor expression. That means she didn't just induce loyalty, she made it self-sustaining and self-reinforcing, even in the presence of weak antidotes. That's why Julian's emotions are completely numbed. That's why he could rationalize humiliating and betraying his own mother as a necessary sacrifice for the project. Evelyn felt a chill crawl through her spine. This was the very nightmare William had foreseen. In other words, Julian has been genetically altered. He's not just a psychological or chemical victim, he's a neurogenetically modified being. He's fighting against his own engineered nature, exactly, Marcus said. And that brings us to what I call the guilt loop. Even if Julian purges the chemical traces of CAA, his altered genes will continue to favor that false loyalty, a kind of genetic compulsion. He'll have to fight it every single day. It's no longer just about chemistry or psychology. It's a war between willpower and rewritten genes. Evelyn stood pacing across the small control room, her steps heavy with repressed emotion. She had to accept that her son wasn't merely a betrayer, he was a patient, a victim of a biological condition no one had ever faced. She had to be both mother and scientist. We need to find the genetic restoration agent, GRA. Evelyn said, focus sharpening. William designed a prototype. Find it in the data. I'll talk to Julian. His recovery must start with Will. She entered the isolation chamber. Julian lay on the bed, hooked to IVs, his vitals stabilizing, though his face twitched in pain and confusion. When he opened his eyes, they were alive again, but filled with horror and self-loathing. "Mother?" Julian rasped, voice hoarse from agony. What have I done? What did I say? I saw you get slapped and I didn't feel anything. No anger, no instinct to protect. It was just an inconvenience in my schedule. He broke down, not the cry of a child, but the deep fractured sob of a man awakening from a nightmare to face the ruin of his own choices. It wasn't just the chemical Mother Julian forced out shaking. Even in those brief lucid moments, I remember believing I had to take the penthouse from you. I was convinced you were standing in the way of a grand purpose. I told myself your humiliation was a necessary sacrifice you should gladly accept. I justified cruelty. And the truth is, even as the chemical started wearing off, a small part of me still wanted to believe the lie, to believe in the power and the visions Sarah promised me. That's my sin, Mother. I allowed it because of my own arrogance. That confession cut Evelyn to the core. It proved Julian's consciousness was returning, but also that his vanity, his moral weakness, had given Sarah the opening she needed. You'll have to fight that, Julian, Evelyn said quietly. Not just the toxin, but the memory of your choices, the greed that once silenced your conscience. I sold my soul, Mother Julian whispered. I saw what Sarah did. She used VGS funds money I thought was mine to acquire military-grade devices and recruit blacklisted scientists. The apartment wasn't just a data vault. It was a command hub disguised as luxury meant to coordinate CAA distribution across global tech leaders, New York Silicon Valley, and beyond. The project wasn't research. It was a systematized overthrow targeting the pillars of global influence. Evelyn nodded, her focus razor sharp again. We need to learn more about Sarah. How deep is her genetic modification? Why is she immune? She told me she re-engineered her own genes 2 years ago to make herself immune and give herself broadcasting capability. She called herself Alpha Modified, the first bio-cybernetic human prototype. Julian revealed horror trembling in his voice. She's not just immune, Mother. She emits a low-frequency sonic field that amplifies CAA's effects in others. She can make subjects more docile or violently aggressive. She's a living psychological transmitter, able to control the minds of anyone exposed to CAA within range. The truth about Sarah grew more monstrous by the minute. She wasn't merely an agent. She was Epsilon Dawn's most successful experiment, a genetically weaponized human. Marcus, you heard that Evelyn said, voice like steel. Sarah Thorne is alpha modified. She can control through low-frequency resonance. We must find her genetic vulnerability. Copy that, Echo 1, Marcus replied. I'm cross-referencing Sarah's genome pattern with the infected CAA profiles from William's data. We'll locate her anomaly. 2 days later, Julian was stable. Though haunted by guilt, his willpower was back. Then Marcus sent a report that would change everything. Mrs. Vance, I found William's design for the genetic restoration agent GRA, a reconstructed phage virus engineered to reverse CAA-induced genetic mutations. And I also found something unusual in Sarah's modified genome. Tell me, Marcus, what's her weakness? Sarah boosted her oxytocin and vasopressin receptor genes to make herself immune and give her broadcasting power. But that modification made her highly vulnerable to a completely different compound. William once researched the neuroresonance inhibitor NRI. NRI is a benign compound, originally designed to treat depression by calming neural receptors. But for Sarah, it would trigger emotional overload and systemic collapse. Evelyn could hardly believe it. Emotional overload. Marcus, she's a soulless machine. She doesn't have emotions. That's exactly it, Mrs. Vance Marcus said. Sarah's not emotionless. She's stripped of natural emotion. Her feelings are algorithmic, based on logic and control. William predicted that genetically modified operatives like her would suppress all emotional sensitivity to maintain stability. NRI forces the nervous system to experience random, uncontrolled human emotion all at once. Grief, love, fear, empathy, overwhelming her brain's synthetic regulation. It would destroy her broadcasting ability and destabilize her entirely. Evelyn turned toward Julian, a spark of hope in her eyes. Can we synthesize NRI? Yes, William left the formula, but we'll need a sophisticated lab and a small neural tissue sample from Sarah to optimize it. And we have to move fast. She's already evaded the FBI and is likely preparing Epsilon Dawn's next phase. She'll come for the data, Julian said, his tone steady, now tinged with grim resolve. She'll come for VGS. She'll want revenge, and she'll exploit your biggest weakness, Mother, your compassion. She'll use your fear for me to make you hesitate. Evelyn nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. The battle ahead wasn't just about saving Julian, it was about safeguarding the future, and she would use her greatest strength, motherhood, as a weapon. Marcus initiates Siren Protocol. Leak limited intel about Julian's location. She'll come for Halsa for him, and when she does, we'll capture her and get the tissue sample we need. I won't make the mistake of waiting again. I'll use maternal instinct to set the trap. Evelyn looked at Julian. Are you willing to be bait, Julian? Are you ready to face the woman who turned you into what you despise? To confront both her manipulation and your own weakness? Julian met her gaze, pain and determination blazing in his eyes. It was my fault, Mother. I'll atone for it, whatever it takes. Save the others. I'll face what I became. I accept the biological risk because it's the only way to reclaim my honor and the truth. Julian's resolve erased the last trace of doubt in Evelyn's heart. The war, a war of biology, will, and redemption, was about to begin. The underground facility of Vance Global Security VGS, perfectly disguised as a biotechnology medical research center on the outskirts of New Jersey, had become the ultimate battlefield where science and emotion collided. The Siren Protocol had been fully activated. Julian, still weak and racked with headaches from the chemical purge, had accepted his role as bait. Evelyn, known to her operatives as Echo 1, monitored every movement from the main control center where Marcus Chen and the tech team oversaw the security network. The tension was so thick it seemed to press the air itself. She was no longer just a security director, she was a mother wagering everything on her son's restored will. Marcus, verify the information leak protocol one last time. Evelyn ordered, her voice a low, gravelly whisper of focus. The intel about Julian's location must be clear enough for Sarah to believe it, but obscure and scattered enough so that Epsilon Dawn doesn't detect the trap. Our enemy isn't a person, it's a scientific terrorist organization built on precision. Confirmed, Mrs. Vance Marcus replied. We used one of Julian's old, long-abandoned communication channels to transmit a fake distress signal. The message reads, I need urgent help. The antidote is hurting me. I'm in New Jersey at Dr. Sterling's old facility site, 4503, underground. Sarah used that facility in her early research days before meeting Julian. She'll believe this is a panicked escape attempt, a chance to reclaim her loyal asset, and to prove her psychological dominance over you. Evelyn nodded. It was the perfect balance of truth and deceit. The old facility was real, but the distress call was pure fabrication. Sarah would be drawn in by her own overconfidence in her alpha-modified superiority. Are we ready to synthesize the neuro-resonance inhibitor NRI? Once we capture Sarah, we'll have only 30 minutes to create it. NRI is the key to shutting down her psychotronic broadcasting ability. Ready, Mrs. Vance Marcus confirmed. Our Level 4 lab is standing by for the neural tissue sample. The moment we retrieve it, synthesis begins. NRI Williams' design forces the subject's nervous system to process an overwhelming flood of raw, uncontrolled emotion, leading to total neural collapse. As predicted, 45 minutes later, the outer perimeter sensors detected a solo infiltration. Not a team, not an army, just Sarah Thorne, a move born of her supreme confidence. She carried a digital injector filled with a new enhanced strain of CAA, ready to deliver the final reinforcement dose to Julian. "She's in the Level 3 corridor," Mrs. Vance Dana reported over comms. No, Evelyn interrupted. "Let her approach Julian. I need him to face her. This will be the final test, the last step in restoring his will. Her fabricated loyalty must collide directly with his reclaimed consciousness." Evelyn entered the observation room, watching Julian seated in the containment chamber. He was pale, trembling, but his eyes burned a mixture of agony and redemption. "Julian," Evelyn said softly, "she's coming. She'll use the sweetest words, the most rationalized cruelty imaginable. You must resist the genetic compulsion. The CAA didn't just alter your biology, it awakened your greed and pride. Those are the true weapons she used." "I know," Mother Julian rasped, his throat-dry voice, hoarse but firm. "I remember everything. I remember treating you like an outdated toy to be discarded. I remember the smugness of thinking I was smarter than you, clever enough to exploit your false weakness. That was the cruelest truth. I'll face it now." Sarah entered the containment chamber, the security door sealed behind her, locking her in. She and Julian were separated only by a wall of reinforced glass. "Julian, my love," Sarah said, her voice honeyed, chillingly soft, as if they'd never stood on opposite sides of a war. She pressed her hand to the glass. "They've deceived you. Your mother is poisoning you with that antidote. She fears our power. I am your truth, Julian. I am your purpose. Resist her lies, we can rebuild the project together." Julian stared at her, his body trembling as his mind battled for dominance. Evelyn watched her pulse pounding. "You're not my purpose, Sarah," Julian said, his voice shaking but resolute. "You're a genetic parasite. You used my arrogance and my weakness to turn me into a puppet. You stripped me of free will, of my humanity. That's worse than death." Sarah's smirked face still eerily composed. "Free will is an illusion, Julian. I rewrote your genes to make you love me. That's pure love, untouched by fear or doubt. Your mother trapped you in deception for 10 years. She hid the truth about your father and about herself. Her lies made you weak, not me." The words cut deep. Evelyn felt them like knives. Sarah was weaponizing guilt, using Evelyn's own mistakes as psychological bait. Sarah Thorne. Evelyn's voice echoed through the intercom, calm but edged with fire. "You're surrounded. Surrender and provide a neural tissue sample. This is your only chance at a fair trial and to avoid VGS eradication." Sarah turned toward the camera, meeting Evelyn's gaze with a cold smile. "You think you can capture me, Evelyn? I'm alpha modified. I can disable your systems with a single neurowave pulse, and I've embedded a failsafe inside my body. If my heart stops, every individual infected with CAA worldwide will descend into psychotic chaos. You wouldn't risk a global neuropandemic, would you?" "You're lying," Evelyn snapped. "Am I?" Sarah taunted. "Go ahead, gamble with the world, or let me go. In exchange, I'll give you Williams' universal antidote formula, the only cure that can fully heal Julian's genetic damage. You know you need it. This is my offer. Your integrity in exchange for your son's salvation." Evelyn's heart pounded. Every word from Sarah was deceit, yet the possibility of that embedded failsafe couldn't be dismissed. The risk of global chaos was too great. "Fine, Sarah," Evelyn said, making a perilous decision. "I won't kill you, but I need your neural tissue sample to synthesize the NRI and neutralize your broadcasting ability. After that, you're free to go. On one condition, you'll accept an implanted bio-tracker so VGS can monitor you indefinitely. That's the only security assurance I'll offer." Sarah's lips curled into a triumphant smile. "Deal. I've always been a woman of science." "Proceed." But remember, Evelyn greed is the strongest motive in existence. Evelyn signaled the Alpha Team operatives, armed with high-tech stun weaponry, to approach. Sarah, basking in her own arrogance, allowed them to take the neural tissue sample from her arm, utterly convinced no one could harm her. The sample was rushed to the Level 4 lab, where Evelyn and Marcus immediately began the NRI synthesis. Every second felt like a lifetime. Precision and timing were absolute. Meanwhile, Julian faced Sarah through the glass, his stare icy and unflinching. "You'll never win, Sarah," he said quietly. "You'll never understand what love truly is. It can't be programmed. And now you're about to lose everything you tried to control." "Wrong," Sarah replied flatly, her voice still devoid of emotion, yet laced with superiority. "Love is control, and I controlled you perfectly. You'll come back to me soon." At that moment, Marcus's voice came over the comms, "NRI synthesis complete." Evelyn didn't hesitate. She entered the containment chamber holding a digital injector filled with the amber gold neuroresonance inhibitor. "You've given your sample, Sarah. Now it's time to fulfill the rest of our agreement," Evelyn said. Sarah stepped back, sensing danger at last. She tried to focus her neurowave energy to disable the system. "You can't stop me. I'm alpha modified. I am evolution itself," Sarah screamed. "Yes," Evelyn said calmly, "you are alpha modified. But I am Julian's mother, and I know the exact weakness of your perfection." She plunged the injector into Sarah's neck. The NRI took effect almost instantly, and what followed was total psychological destruction. Sarah Thorne, the woman who had never shown a flicker of genuine feeling, began to convulse. Her face contorted not in physical pain, but in emotional implosion. She screamed not with rage or defiance, but with terror, grief, and unbearable loneliness. Her synthetic neural circuits built to suppress emotion were now drowning in it. "Stop it, it's too much. These feelings, I can't control them. It's chaos. I'm scared. I'm so alone," Sarah cried, collapsing to the floor, trembling violently. Evelyn watched in silence, not with pity, but with cold resolve. Sarah Thorne had been destroyed by the one thing she deemed inferior, the chaotic depth of human emotion. "Sarah," Evelyn said at last, her tone glacial, "you're free to leave, but your broadcasting ability is gone permanently. You're just a woman now hypersensitive to every emotion you once suppressed. Live with your regret." And for the first time in her existence, Sarah Thorne wept not from programming, but from being human. 3 years after the biological confrontation in New Jersey, the silence of consequence echoed louder than the explosion that once tore through the 60th floor of the Crown. Evelyn Reed had stepped fully into the light, running Vance Global Security VGS publicly. She had used every resource and connection at her disposal to hunt down the remnants of Epsilon Dawn, yet the real battlefield lay deep within the souls of those who had survived the war. Evelyn's victory was bitter, incomplete, and heavy with loss. Julian had been treated with the genetic restoration agent GRA, the phage virus William designed to reverse genetic modification. Biologically, he was cured, but he could not escape the permanent psychological scar, the aftermath of the guilt loop. Julian had not only battled the withdrawal from CAA's synthetic emotional addiction, he had to face the horrifying truth that a part of him, even while lucid, had chosen to believe Sarah's lies. Mother Julian said to Evelyn during their final therapy session, his eyes shadowed with unutterable remorse, "I remember it so vividly, standing there watching Sarah slap you, and the only thing I felt was relief. Relief that the bothersome old woman was finally gone. I rationalized cruelty. The CAA didn't create evil. It just stripped away the moral restraint that hid the arrogance and greed already inside me. My worst sin wasn't what I did under control. It was how easily I let it happen." His confession was both a wound and a balm to Evelyn, an acknowledgement that her son was finally free but no longer the boy she once knew. Forgiveness, she realized, did not mean return. Evelyn made her final, hardest decision to cut all personal and financial ties with Julian, giving him the chance to rebuild himself from nothing, "You've been healed biologically," Julian Evelyn said, her tone firm yet aching with maternal grief. "But dignity and identity must be rebuilt from within. I can't be your safety net anymore. You have to face the consequences of your ambition and weakness alone." Julian accepted this without protest. He left the world of high technology behind and began working anonymously at a nonprofit focused on scientific ethics in the outskirts of Oregon. He asked for no support, only sent one message months later. "Mother, I've found redemption in helping others resist manipulation. Thank you for not saving me from myself." The war was not over. 6 months after Julian's departure, Sarah Thorne reappeared, after being injected with the neuro-resonance inhibitor NRI. She had lost her psychotronic control abilities, but she was still alive, still carrying the bio-tracking signature. VGS traced her to an abandoned laboratory in Utah. Sarah was no longer the cold, emotionless figure she once was. The NRI had overwhelmed her with chaotic human emotions, and in an act of self-preservation, she had reprogrammed her body, completely nullifying natural feelings. She had become a true biomechanical being. Evelyn faced Sarah inside the decaying lab, surrounded by rusted technology and flickering screens. "I knew you'd come," Sarah said evenly, her voice devoid of tone or rhythm. "I've removed weakness entirely. I feel nothing now. CAA is obsolete. Pure control, that's the only truth." "You're a machine, Sarah," Evelyn replied. "And you're a sentimental fool," Sarah said, suddenly drawing a syringe filled with a black liquid. "This isn't CAA. It's the inverse reaction of NRI. It will amplify Julian's genetic guilt loop until he takes his own life. I'll take from you the only thing you still cherish, peace." Sarah lunged. Though Evelyn lacked Sarah's genetic enhancements, she had the instincts of a lifelong security operative. She fought with precision, using her environment, anticipating patterns, staying one move ahead. She knew she couldn't let the black serum spill. At the critical moment, as Sarah raised the syringe to strike, Evelyn used her platinum brooch, the very same one from the humiliating wedding night, and drove it into Sarah's wrist, piercing the vein. Sarah screamed a sound that had been programmed to simulate anger, but not true pain. Yet this time it wasn't a scream of defeat, it was a scream of release. When Sarah was finally neutralized, VGS moved in. Within weeks, Epsilon Dawn was completely eradicated. Evelyn used the remainder of her fortune to establish the William Reed Foundation for Neuroethics and Recovery, building a research center in California. She became a global symbol of female resilience against manipulation and moral corruption. She published her best-selling memoir, The Scar of Choice, A Mother's Battle Against Biomanipulation. In the final chapter, Evelyn wrote a letter to women between the ages of 35 and 60, her generation, her reflection. "I spent 10 years in disguise. I made the fatal mistake of believing I could protect my son by hiding the truth. My overprotection fed his arrogance, creating the genetic vulnerability our enemies exploited. Dignity isn't a luxury to be concealed or sacrificed. It is truth itself. It is resilience. Have the courage to face the truth about those you love, even when it hurts." True motherhood isn't about shielding your children from every consequence. It's about giving them the strength to endure and overcome those consequences themselves. Never build a mask of weakness that others can exploit. Be the echo one of your own life, the leader, the protector, and the one who makes the final call. Standing on the terrace of her new villa overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Evelyn Reed understood that she had lost the illusion of a perfect family, but had gained something infinitely greater: truth, dignity, and the indomitable power of human will. The peace Evelyn Reed thought she had found after neutralizing Sarah Thorne and severing ties with Julian was nothing more than a fragile illusion. 3 years of public life had brought her power and prestige, but also made her a visible target. The William Reed Foundation for Neuroethics and Recovery had flourished, becoming a beacon of moral neuroscience. Yet within the walls of this same institution, the seed of a new and far deeper threat began to germinate. It started as a small technical glitch, an insignificant system fault in the Foundation's top-tier security algorithm. The system was designed to be impervious to outside intrusion, but a secondary subroutine automatically activated and sent a small encrypted data packet to an unknown IP address somewhere in the Black Sea. "Marcus, do you see this?" Evelyn asked, her sharp gaze fixed on the monitor displaying the error. "That's a quantum anchor packet. William wrote that algorithm over a decade ago. It was supposed to be purged from VGS's core system." Marcus Chen, normally the embodiment of calm professionalism, furrowed his brow. "Yes, Echo One. That's an archival fail-safe, a backup system William created to protect original data from physical destruction, but it should only activate in the event of a catastrophic server failure. It shouldn't be sending anything on its own." Evelyn felt a chill crawl down her spine. This wasn't a malfunction, it was a signal. And such a signal could only be triggered by one of two things: a contingency William had predicted long ago, or by someone who had deciphered part of his work. "Trace that IP immediately," she ordered, "and re-examine every byte of data from the USB we recovered at the Crown. I think we missed something fundamental about William's legacy." The deeper analysis revealed a disturbing truth. The USB retrieved from the Crown hadn't contained the full data set. It was a decoy folder, a bait archive William had created to mislead intruders like Epsilon Dawn. The most critical piece, the Genesis algorithm, was missing. This was the master code capable of generating the perfect universal antidote and the flawless genetic restoration agent, GRA. Mrs. Vance Marcus said, after hours of grueling decryption, that's why Julian still carries the genetic scar. The GRA we used was only a beta version. It healed most of the genetic alteration, but not all. A faint residue of the false loyalty imprint remains. It's harmless as long as his will stays strong, but it's a genetic vulnerability. Evelyn's chest tightened with regret. Once again, she had settled for an incomplete solution. Once again, she had trusted William's systems more than her own instincts. "If the Genesis algorithm is missing," Evelyn murmured, "then where did William hide it? It's not the kind of code you can just lock in a safe deposit box." Marcus discovered something embedded within the quantum anchor packet itself. Not scientific data, but a poetic cipher, referencing the private language William and Evelyn once shared. "The only safe place is the one we share, where memory is the key and skin is the lock." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. It was a message from William, a riddle from their youth, a line from a game of hide-and-seek they used to play. He had encrypted his most valuable data using love itself, coded into her biometrics and emotional patterns. She remembered the old necklace William had given her 25 years ago, right after Julian was born. It wasn't gold or platinum, but crafted from a polymer alloy, light and unassuming. She had sold nearly all her luxurious jewelry when adopting her false widow's identity, but that necklace she'd kept, not for its value, but for sentiment. "Marcus, Evelyn," said her voice trembling slightly, "track my old necklace. It's a polymer piece with a double helix design. It's not valuable, but I believe William designed it as a mobile biometric lock capable of storing the Genesis algorithm, encrypted with my DNA and my unique body temperature signature." But then came the chilling discovery. The trace on the mysterious IP led to a server in Bulgaria, the last known headquarters of Epsilon Dawn. They know William hid something Marcus warned grimly. They detected the quantum anchor signal. They'll come for the necklace, and they know it's connected to you. Meanwhile, in Oregon, Julian Reed was struck by a violent headache, not from residual toxins, but from a coded neuro-trigger. Images flooded his mind: the penthouse, the necklace, and Sarah's face. Evelyn called him immediately. "Julian, you need to do something for me. Please trust me. Go to William's penthouse, the one where we used to play hide-and-seek, and find the necklace I told you about." "Do you remember?" Julian was silent for a long moment. "Mother, I cut ties with you to atone. I don't want to be your instrument again." The words cut deep. Julian had found his free will, and now that same will was rejecting her. Julian. Evelyn said, her voice softening into sorrow. This isn't an order. It's a truth. The Genesis algorithm is missing. The GRA didn't completely heal you. If Epsilon Dawn retrieves it, they can create a perfect CAA and even a counteragent to the GRA itself. You'll become their permanent hostage, and everything we've built will collapse. That truth hit Julian harder than any guilt ever had. He realized that the false loyalty gene still lived inside him, dormant, but not gone. I'll do it, Julian said finally. But you have to promise me something, Mother. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I need to finish what I started. I need to cleanse myself completely. I'll bring back the necklace.